Germany, you have to choose as a musician if you want to be member of the levy system GEMA, or if you want to use Creative Commons. It's because the GEMA isn't, they don't really like Creative Commons in the moment. They say, okay, for our levy system, the licenses are not comparable because we have the composer, we have the author, we have the singer and interpreter. What's your answer to them?
Well, that statement isn't true. Systems are perfectly comparable. In the United States, we have the same structure of rights. What's different is that in the United States, the collecting rights societies are not exclusive. And in many places in Europe, they're exclusive. So you have to make a choice as an artist, whether to be part of the collecting rights society or not. Now, I think the general problem here is that we've not yet come to a stage where the collecting rights societies admit something which I think everybody, when they think about it, must admit. And that is that there are places where people use culture, music, that should not be subject to the regulation of the law. Right? Should be free of the regulation of the law. My favorite example of this is a testimony that John Philip Sousa gave in 1906 before the United States Congress, where he was criticizing the talking machines and how the talking machines are going to destroy artistic development of music. And he romanticizes this idea of the young people together singing the songs of the day or the old songs. That's what he grew up with, like young people getting together on an afternoon or an evening and just singing songs. Now, in that testimony, he was asked by a member of Congress, well, should they pay for that? Because Sousa was testifying in support of strengthening intellectual property. And he was outraged at the question. Of course they shouldn't pay for that. I mean, this is just, use of culture by individuals that, is in some sense free of the regulation of copyright law. And he's emphasizing a point that I think it's easy for us to forget. It is important that there be a use of culture free of the regulation of copyright law. And the job of copyright law is to draw the balance between the appropriate places for regulation, the appropriate places for freedom. Right? So, in principle, the GEMA could put devices in everybody's shower and record what songs you sing in the shower in the morning and charge you for that. Or, in principle, we could be taxing every single context in which music might be performed in order to guarantee that we're collecting revenues every time music is actually invoked. But I think a more traditional view is to recognize there are places where the law of copyright is appropriate and places where it's not. And what we have to do in the context of the internet is try to find ways to draw that line, to distinguish between places it's appropriate and places that it's not. Now, Creative Commons is firmly of the view that it's that we ought to have a free place and we ought to have a regulated place. Right? We ought to have a place where people's use is free of the regulation of copyright law in the effective sense, and a place where it's not free of the regulation of copyright law. And we use devices like the non-commercial commercial distinction or the share-alike condition to draw that line. Right? So in the non-commercial space, we're saying you should be able to freely share this. Don't worry about paying people. Just obey the non-commercial restrictions. You'll be fine. But if you want to begin to perform this publicly, or you want to begin to sell this, then that's a commercial use, and you have to obey by the commercial rights. So we believe in these two economies living together. And I think, unfortunately, many collecting rights societies believe there should be only one. I mean, I once was at a conference where this woman was talking about the emerging permission society. I use that term as a way to ridicule what's happening, but she was celebrating it. She was talking about a world where every single use of culture would be taxed. We would have devices to figure out every time you hummed or every time you sang, and then you would be paying for that right to do that. And in my view, that's totalitarian, right? There ought to be limits to regulation of culture. And we need to recognize it. And I think more collecting rights societies need to begin to talk about where they think the limit is. Because the logic of their position is, every time culture is invoked, somebody ought to be paid. And if somebody has to be paid, then we have to be monitoring and policing every time culture is invoked. And I think the perpetual spying of the devices necessary to monitor and police every time culture is invoked is wildly more burdensome and costly to society than just dividing between those places where it's appropriate to be regulating and those places that ought to be free. I think there's a long conversation to have with the collecting rights societies, because I think ultimately they will be in the position that I think we already are in. And we'll be talking in common about, well, what is the line? Where is the appropriate line? Is it when 20 kids get together on a MySpace page? Should somebody have to be paying for that music? I think we all agree if you put a song up on the web to sell for people to download, yeah, of course you ought to be paying for that. But it's on the other side that I think we need to have a richer conversation. And those who would simplify the story and just say it's either free for everybody, for all contexts in all ways, or people who say you have to be paid for every single use, both of those simplifiers are making a fundamental mistake.